You're tuned in to the Stingbat Radio Network on FM 101.2 KRPG. Welcome to Dungeon Master Diaries, the podcast about Shadowdark and other role-playing games where two GMs talk about the recent experiences at the table and hopefully give you something useful that you can take to yours. On the show today, we discuss initiative in Shadowdark. Hey. What's up, sages and adventurers? My name is Matt. With me, as always, my good friend and GM colleague and my bro, Jody. What's going on, bud?
Dude, I'm ready. Let's do this. Is it my turn? Can I go? Can I go? Can I start? Tell me when to start.
Hold on, dude. I got to roll for... I go next. Hey, dude, I got to roll for random encounters, my dude. Today's episode focuses... I can't keep doing that. Today's episode focuses on Shadowdark's initiative system and our takes on initiative in general. So, Jody, take us to the table.
Gladly. So I've been running my Saltmarsh Saturday ongoing campaign NIS for a while now. And one of the things I set out to kind of redress and reconnect with was using Shadowdark's initiative system, rules as written, as much as possible. And what I've realized is even within the very simple rules as written Shadowdark initiative system, I still am adding weird wrinkles and extra steps that are not really there that I believe very strongly in. And it's a very simple system, and yet I keep adding things. More on that later in the show. But in the last couple weeks, I began scratching my chin whiskers as one does and having deep, meaningful thoughts while staring at my navel. And lo and behold, a sample dungeon landed in my hand. One from Dragonbane. And I was flipping through and looking at their monsters, and they have this crazy thing where one monster could go not once, but twice in an initiative round. And I thought, that's crazy talk. Who would ever do that? And I said, me. So I wrote up some rules and I gave it a shot. Didn't get to as many samples. You're getting it hot off the presses here, folks, of one playthrough, and tried something to mess with initiative specifically for one monster versus an entire party. That kind of setup, not, many versus many, but, one versus the whole crew. An initial sample seems pretty good, but I'm not ready to give up the raw just yet.
All right, Jody, let us gather around the fire and talk about the Dragonbane monster mashup, malevolence, maelstrom.
Ooh, I like that.
Okay, so what'd you do? Talk to, just lay it out for us.
Yeah, really.
Which, by the way, that is what you're supposed to do in the setting the table and taking us to the table segment, is tell us what you did. But you can do that here too.
Oh, I like it. It was a teaser, man. Try it. So.
That's the whole structure of the show.
No, but see, I double clutched the initiative. That's what happened, and that's what I was doing here. It was like a start and then another start for my next turn. I got another turn as the GM. What I did was this, is in Dragonbane, monsters that are one-on-one fights, and they're set up to be that way. That's unique to that system a little bit, is they'll have a ferocity rating, and it's how many initiative cards or beats they'll be given it. Dragonbane works on a dealing of initiative card system. And if you're a monster with a ferocity rating of 2 or 3, you get that many initiative beats. And when that number initiative card comes up, you go. So what I did to stick in the let us all in combat roll for initiative, high die begins the round, I rolled a D20 for each of the ferocity points. So the critter I used was a ghostly librarian, and it was loosely based on a specter from Shadowdark. And so I assigned it 2 dice in the initiative roll, and the other 5 players, they all rolled their initiative roll. So we cast our dice, and directly across from me in the circle around the table was Silas, our Elven Ranger, and he was going to go first. And then I also had my turn. So I took the top die of my 2 initiative dice out of my pool of 2. The 10 got removed, and I had a 2. And I said, well, the 2 will slot in wherever it would slot in the other initiatives, as though it were another player. And so we just slotted it in as a player seat there. So the initiative order was top player at the table, 2 more players, I get my GM turn. 1 more player goes, the monster gets to go again, and then the players finish out around the table, and that was our initiative go. And then there's also some rolling of random attacks that are interesting too, but that's not really the initiative piece. Mm-hmm. And it got one of its attacks. It only did 1 attack on each of its goes in the initiative loop around the table. And it was interesting. It did create a changed, more dynamic state where it's not the monster goes and then 5 people kick its butt. And then the monster goes and then 5 people kick its butt. And then the monster goes. Right. And it was something to chop up that loop that I was finding unsatisfying. And this is specifically for 1 versus many. If it's 5 players versus 10 goblins, I've got no problem there. The 10 goblins all just running amok at once works just fine. It's the other 1 versus many. And also just for setting up the initiative thing, Matt, you've on a recent episode talked about it, but you've also been like running online, and man, the initiative system of always on initiative around the table is like the most, I feel like at this point is the most talked about Shadowdark thing that there is.
Oh gosh. I mean, I really want to talk about this, but I want to say up top that I have I don't have strong opinions. I don't like initiative. Like I don't like any of the systems out there. I do and I don't. Okay, so I just...
And credit where credit's due, dude. You've tried them all.
I have, but I don't think... here's the thing. I think that initiative is very group dependent, and I also think that it's very player dependent. I think that like individual players are going to like one initiative system more than another, and oftentimes it is very difficult to find an entire table of people who like the same initiative system. I also think that many players don't really think about it that much, and we're also just doing what we normally do as GMs and thinking about stuff very deeply, that our players are like, cool, we're doing something different this week because Matt got a bee in his bonnet and is like, I don't like initiative anymore. Now, I have been running online. I also have been using Always On Initiative. I want to lay out from the top here, Jody. I want to lay out sort of broadly speaking that there are 2 initiative systems in Shadowdark that are in the core rulebook. There's Always On Initiative, where players take individual turns and go around the table, and the GM gets a turn, et cetera, et cetera. That one is well documented and well laid out. There's also Freeform Initiative, where kind of there's conversations, things are moving around the table in a more free-form way, hence the name. And eventually, once everyone has taken an action and done a move or whatever, then the GM takes a turn, and then we have used both of those in our tenures. I used Freeform Initiative a lot during our Sunday, once a month Sunday Shadowdark sessions. I wouldn't necessarily require that we go around from my left and, whatever, or whoever started initiative. However, what I have found running online is a kind of strange duality where Always On Initiative is very helpful for ensuring that we don't have crosstalk or people talking over each other. It is also very isolating in terms of people have to basically stop talking until it is their turn. I feel like the last couple of sessions I have been remedying that problem, and I would like to talk about that. But what I want to do is I want you to tell me your arc, right? Your arc of initiative. And you can start in 5th edition, you can start all the way back what you used to do back in your kind of, your wee days as a gamer. But what is sort of your experience with initiative systems as a whole? And, where does maybe Shadowdark's system kind of fit into that puzzle?
I think I can't talk to that question without just kind of doing the Jody's gamer history.
Sure. Lay it on us.
That is it. So I'll keep it tidy because this will be slightly more interesting than let me tell you about my character.
If you could insert a couple of characters in there, and please tell me about some of their proclivities, idiosyncrasies.
Well, this one time,
yeah, this guy has a cape, and he got it because he slaughtered.
Exactly. So I began with not knowing or understanding what initiative was, which then prompts the question: how did you resolve turns? And I go, yeah, that's a good question.
I love all these videos now of like people being like, they used to use these things called dungeon turns back in the day. And, they're like, yeah, I wonder how many, teenagers are like, all right, that's going to take a turn. Allow me to mark that on my dungeon checklist. Like,
yeah, I was.
Were you doing that?
No. I was kind of unaware that those things happened. I rolled random encounters when I felt like it, and the more frustrated I was, the more I felt like it, and the more. So basically, we, in a weird way back then, when I had no real understanding of, initiative or weapons speed ratings or any of that, the cooler older kids would speak highly of a rapier's speed rating and which is preferable, a halberd or a glaive in terms of its speed rating and reach. I was unaware of these
things mattered, Jody. People are saying
somewhere there is a group right now who is like, yeah, that's our entire basis for combat. So what we did ended up kind of looking like Shadowdark, funny enough, in terms of the always on initiative. We would just go round and round and round, and everyone would say what happened, and round you went. And then I got quite a bit older and, took the teenage gap in playing that a lot of people experience. I, in high school, really didn't play RPGs at all. It wasn't until well into college that I picked it back up. And then we were playing Third Ed, and we played it generally as most D&D does, which is in combat. There is a very rigid structure of this is how combat turns resolve. Outside of combat, it's much as Shadowdark's freeform, but it's just this all the time kind of freeformy soup of you jump in, and if you're quiet, well, you don't get to play much because you're quiet. And then if you talk too much, like some people, not naming my own name, but I've heard it's a thing some people do, then you get lots of turns. You get to do lots of stuff when you're exploring the dungeon, and we did that. I did find that when I returned to 5e, like so many, I did start trying to make sure I moved around the table and checked in with each player. Didn't hold to it super rigidly. It was just something of noticing past play practices and began trying that. And then, we have Shadowdark now that really codifies it as you want to stay always on. But I'll be honest, as you well know, I will try to stay in always on initiative, even in person. But if it is a conversation with an NPC and there's 3 characters there, we just freeform it. And we slide in and out of always on initiative to freeform, which is a thing that I feel like is lost in the nuance of the soundbite of the internet that really only works in person. That is not a viable approach. That the sliding in and out of always on initiative and then moving into this kind of free-formy thing and then back into always on. In person, you have this, you can read social cues. You can raise your hand, kind of. You can watch the person's across you. Eyes get big when you say something dumb, and then you can be like, and I back off and wait for them. The GM can interrupt. There's a lot of things that work well in person, little micro communications that just are lost via, an online chat. So my in person, to get to what am I actually doing now, I follow the order around the table and I stay in always on unless we go into freeform. And then we just go into freeform as long as we need to and we come back. If we are in a dungeon setting where we are going on always on initiative, but we're in exploration, I add in a step of declaration and resolution, not as a strict, I could check it off on a 6-round sheet, but I will go, what are you going to do this turn, player to my left? Next player. Okay, what are you intending to do? What are you intending to do? Okay, I need a roll for that. Next person, what are you going to do? Okay, you're good. Next one, what are you going to do? Okay, and then I'll backtrack usually and go, okay, so this is what happened when you looked at the trunk. Okay, you're going to go check behind the curtains. It's just a wall back there. Hey, what did you get on that intelligence test I asked for? You got a 20. Oh my gosh. Here's all the things you just learned and figured out about the magic, Satan box you're playing with. Okay, cool. Person to my left. Oh, so you remember when you said you're going to open up that door? Yeah, goblins come rushing in. Now let's roll for initiative.
Right.
And it's this ping-ponging in and out. So there's an extra step I add, which is not rules as written. So my intro was completely useless.
So that's really interesting. I want to ask you kind of some follow-ups there, but I'll lay my sort of initiative thoughts on the table because I don't like initiative insofar as it is a necessary evil. Mm-hmm. So if I had my druthers, if I could do it in one way and have it work the way that I would want it to work, here is how it would be. It would be, on a given turn, the players would talk amongst themselves, and we would have a caller. I liked having a caller in our Sunday games quite a bit, but it would be a much more sort of, you go figure it out. The caller tells me what everybody's doing. We adjudicate it. That's the round. We move on. That only works if you have players who are interested in that style of play. And I feel like you do need to be decisive. Otherwise it can kind of drag, and you can have situations where there's too much discussion about the classic, how do we get through this door, right? But with a certain group, that would be great. It would be an opportunity for me as the GM to take a step back. The way that I've been running Initiative online is always on, and with a couple of wrinkles. I started running it using basically allowing everybody to kind of quote unquote seat themselves wherever they wanted. And we create a numbered order, and I would just kind of allow who's sitting to the left of me, right?
Right.
And that was good, but it really bogged down the beginning of the session. And so the last couple sessions, what I've been doing is just having everybody roll a dex check. And then I just put them in dex order. I roll a d20. I put myself wherever I line up in that order, and that becomes our table order. And then we just roll initiative, and then that person starts, and we just roll through. And it's basically, a list that once you get to the bottom, you just head to the top. So inevitably that works. It has worked the last couple sessions. It also speeds things up. Because no one's trying to game the initiative system seating situation. I like it. I think it's fun to kind of have to deal with a different initiative system, etc. But the thing you said about going in and out of freeform and always on, I have been, as a GM, trying to be very proactive about solving that problem in the following ways. The first way is, and I'll give you an example. Basically, there was a moment in our game yesterday. This was the most recent game at the time of recording in my kindly craw online open table on the Shadowdark Discord channel. There was a moment where it was very clear that we needed to have, there was a crossroads, essentially. I think an actual four-way intersection. And it was very clear that, no one wanted to push beyond it. No one wanted to make the decision. And so I was just like, folks, I'm going to actually, we're going to, you guys arrive at this crossroads. I'm actually going to pull us out of initiative. You all talk about what you want to do, and then we can go back into initiative. And I've been also opening the session by saying, if you want to break out of initiative, any of you on your turn can essentially break initiative and have conversations with other players, and we can go into a more meta conversation, or even an in-character conversation. And that allows and gives kind of license for the person whose turn it is to break the initiative and make sure that the other players at the table, they know they can bring them into the conversation. And it's actually worked really well. In person, I don't know. I've had this conversation with people on the Discord. I like what you're doing. I also just like, kind of going in and out of freeform and just going around the table when we need some structure, going into freeform when we don't. The last thing I'm going to say is that I still think that Shadowdark's initiative system that you are trying to solve for this problem with a single monster, I'm not super stoked, and I don't really like that there are situations where all the players get to go and the monsters just have to sit there while 5 players take their turns. And then the monsters get to go all at once, which can privilege the monsters, but it can also privilege the players. And oftentimes it just feels unsatisfying because it's just a bunch of player turns. And then sometimes if you have a lot of monsters, it's like the GM taking this long turn where I'm like, man, I'm wasting your guys' time. You're just watching me roll dice, and bad things are happening to you. I would much rather interject with okay, the trogs go here. Okay, this giant thing in the darkness that I can't reveal because it's spoiler is going to shoot pus at you here, and then this NPC you just met is going to go here. 3 different times we're going to break up the play. I can't do that. I have to adjudicate all of them on my turn, and I'm going really fast, and sometimes I forget, and that just really bothers me that either I'm wasting their time, I'm not, it's privileging either the players or me, depending on the number of creatures who are in the encounter or number of players. I don't know. That stuff just really bothers me, and I don't know a good way to fix it without without causing other problems.
Right. The Dragonbane system of giving a card to each person, it still wouldn't fix that problem because if it was 10 goblins, you still give one card to the 10 goblins. You don't have to, but that's would again get tedious where literally every time a player goes, now there's like three goblins and you have to track individually. Like we're back to this tracking issue, and that's kind of the core of the whole thing, isn't it? Is this use of time. Like that's what initiative systems are doing, making sure everybody's getting their turn and then moving through things efficiently, like that there is structure. One of the things I want to kind of join in on the like, hey, this isn't a panacea. This isn't the one thing solves all of always on initiative that gets credit. There are still problems with not only hogging the spotlight, but like, I really like your phrasing around isolating.
Yeah.
Because in person, it plays out in a very isolated way.
You
and I are both looking for ways to break that isolation and get to collaboration. The caller is great because a caller at the table allows, there is a player, not the GM, a player with a character who is coordinating the discussion. What we found in running a lot of sessions with callers on our Sunday open tables in person when we were doing that was some people are good at being the caller and some aren't. Some people are wildly uncomfortable being the caller because by default, you are the leader of that conversation. Mm-hmm. And it's even harder that oftentimes the people who naturally are good callers will then also put their character as the leader of the party, which it's not. It's a role you are facilitating separate from your character. And that can be really challenging. But I want to go back to this isolating idea. What happens in true, always on initiative, if you're playing it maximally strict, and I think online, in my experience, it is the best of many bad answers. And I really love your solution of like a raise of hand or a something to be like, hey, can we break and have a meta discussion? Mm-hmm. That's a common phrase that one of our players uses that's at both of our tables very regularly. He says, hey, above table. Like I actually associate it with that player, even though it's a very common phrase. Mm-hmm. He just uses it really well to be like, hey, above table, where are we at with this? But what happens in true Shadowdark, like really maximally sticking to it is, so GM calls person to their left and we're in an exploration turn. What are you doing? Oh, I'm going to go check the cabinet. Okay, you get to the cabinet, you open it up, and then this happens. All right, great. You move to the next person. What are you doing? Well, I was going to check the cabinet, but you said there's nothing. No. Okay, well then I guess I'll go to the desk. Okay, you go to the desk, you look through it, make a roll. Oh, okay, there's nothing there. Next person, what are you going to do? Oh, I'm going to go to the closet. Okay, they already went to the closet. Oh, I missed that. Okay, this is some tedious garbage right now.
Yeah.
And that's why I started adding the declaration roll or the declaration round is like, hey, what's everybody doing? Let's take it around the table and talk about what you're going to do. And then I'll tell you what happens.
Do you allow
for some coordination? Yes.
So
and that's why I do it.
Okay. Let me,
but it wouldn't work. Like flat out would not work online.
No,
I would be, my head would pop.
No, it would be terrible. I want to ask you about this because I will say as a GM, I can't run like this because I can't remember everything and it drives me bonkers. But okay, so you've definitely solved it in one way. So this is my problem. The isolation means that there's that always on initiative disincentivizes teamwork and collaboration.
Exactly.
And I find that distasteful, but again, it's sometimes a necessary evil, especially because of the alternatives not being great for every group and being very player and personality dependent. We can just say right now, we're not going to come to any conclusions about the best.
No, I think we're exploring what it is.
Right.
Yeah, there is not a right answer.
But what I want you to tell me is like, how do you deal with the cognitive load? And this is another question that I want to steer us into, which is when always on initiative works the best, it is when players make declarative statements about what they want to do, you adjudicate them quickly and you move through turns rapidly rather than sinking lots of additional questions in. In the example that you gave, there was somebody who made an intelligence check, I think was kind of your example, right? Okay, one of the places that I have to really be careful not to get bogged down in individual initiative is like information delivery, lore delivery, especially actionable lore or like interesting lore that player or character cares about. They make an intelligence test. They rolled a 20 or whatever, right? Like a 21 or whatever, a very high number. How do you make sure that you don't spend an undue amount of time delivering a bunch of information to that player, and then the next player is like, you don't find anything. Moving on. Like, I find that distasteful because, not because I want everybody to have the exact same amount of time, but because it feels like I am privileging certain kinds of play more than others in certain circumstances, where like certain turns, just by the nature of what the player asked to do, will take longer to adjudicate, which gives that player more time back and forth with the GM. Whereas like some players are playing the game in a different way and doing so in a way that I can adjudicate very quickly. They're very engaged players, but like the questions they're asking, things they're doing, they're quicker to adjudicate, and so they don't get as much time back and forth. Well, like I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but
I do. So the first thing that comes to mind is the fighter. Funny enough.
Yeah, 100%.
Because the fighter is like, I'm on guard duty. And you're like, cool, nothing's coming. Cool, it's quiet down the hallway.
I had this yesterday.
And like, no wonder people are like, I don't want to play a fighter. That sucks. Like, sure. The other problem is, funny enough, I was asking my wife about, there was a discussion on our Discord about moving through turns and like checking in with people. And the whole conversation was super interesting. And my take was, this is completely not on my radar of things, which either means I am horrible at it or I'm doing it okay. Well, the only person I could really ask to be like, okay, I need you to be really brutally honest of like, am I terrible at this? Is my wife. And like, it would be a weird, I felt like this is the, sometimes there are questions we don't want to ask players because it would be very weird.
Yeah.
And like ask them to say something mean. I don't know, just puts them in a weird spot.
Sure.
And she reassured me that she's like, no, you tell me I can't do all that on my turn all the time. And what happens is she'll go like, okay, so I want to go over here and check for traps, but I'm also keeping an eye on that statue in the corner to see how it reacts. But I also know that there's some windows and I want to go see what's out the window. And I'll go like, which one are you doing on your turn? So to answer your question about like moving, speed is the answer.
Yeah.
That's literally, how do I get through going, there are 5 people, I'm going to ask you what you all intend to do so you can hear each other say, so you can, and sometimes thankfully people go like, oh yeah, we'll both go look in the desk, armoire, window, Splatoon. I like, that's a thing. I don't know what it is, but it's a thing. Dang it. And so get around quick is how, like, it's how quick can I get around? And then the die rolling problem of somebody gets more behind a die roll. I've become hyper cautious of that, of like, if I ask for a dice roll, am I inherently rewarding something? Try to be really careful that I'm not doing that first and foremost, that if I'm asking for a dice roll, it's because I don't know. Like that, I'm like, I legitimately don't know, or I don't know that your character would know, is really more the case of like, hey, you picked up this old timey tome, ranger. I don't know that that's your thing. Make an intelligence test because you're the one flipping through it. Cool. And that's and anymore, I tend to default to like, it's normal. Make a normal intelligence check. Let me know what you got. I'm going to come back around because it's fast. And it's how quick can I get around? Another thing I've started doing, again, inspired by your feedback, is this is tied into 2 things. One, your feedback of like, give more info, like be the fountain of information to your people. And getting kind of in tune with the VHS style of adventure layout, which is what's visible, what's hidden, and then what's secret. And going, okay, if it's visible, get them all of that when they walk in the room.
Yeah.
Then what's hidden, when they've finished that, tell them. Right? If they go ask questions and look at stuff, here's everything that's hidden, and then tell them you think you have found everything at surface level.
Oh my gosh, I wanted this. Yes.
So that's part of it, is like so I don't have to do it 16 times, because that's where it bogs down, is if you do 3 of these sweeps of what are you intending to do? What are you intending to do? The number of people with something to do gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So try and like dump. And then if there is a secret, nobody's poked at it. Well, we got to do one more round. Hey, we've got a round here. They're fiddling with the thing. I'm rolling my random encounter die. I'm rolling my crawling clock. What are you all doing? And it's a little reminder to the party of like, hey man, we can't stand here all day picking this lock.
So I want to say two things. First of all, actually three things. First of all, I love...
Can I get four?
No, I was actually thinking about if I had four things to say. I legitimately didn't.
Three it is. Go.
Three it is. I probably just forgot one of them. So the first thing is that I don't always do this, but there are points where I think it's reasonable for the GM to say, you have found everything in this room that there is to find. The second thing I want to say is that Always on Initiative and the torch timer get I think fairly and unfairly critiqued for their punishing of like extended in-character role play. I don't know. You and I don't run for tables that like to do long-form extemporaneous in-character role-playing, but we also don't not like doing that, right? Like I like doing scenes, and we have had many scenes at my tables and your tables where players have spoken in character back and forth during crawling rounds. It's not uncommon. And I think that like rounds in general and like Always on Initiative, I do think that like if you're doing that stuff for 20 minutes or, you know, like you're really theater kidding it up, then you know, the crawling clock or excuse me, the torch timer and you know, Always on Initiative and kind of these rigid round structures can feel very punishing for a kind of play that is more theatrical. But I also think that like we've had lots of great role play in the Kindly Cross sessions, and it's mostly people preempting. This is actually some advice for players, where if you want to role play in a very sort of procedure heavy game, the best thing to do is to say, because my character is interested in, or because of my background, or because of my affiliation with Ord or some other god, my character is really interested in this. And then you can even like a little, you know, 1 or 2 sentence in character, like, so he's going to turn to this other character and say, hey, I think this is really interesting, you know, and do it in a, you know, and do your in-character role play, and then go do the thing, and we adjudicate it, and it's very quick. And I have found that to be very successful in threading the needle of quick turns, a little bit of role play, and, you know, I'm not running these games for extended character-to-character role play session long.
Yeah, I mean, dungeon crawling is the focus.
Right. But that doesn't mean it has to be devoid of role play entirely. Like, we have players who are very interested in their characters, and, you know, I'm thinking of a few right now that like that I know a lot about their character just because they preface their actions with why they're doing it. Like, what about their character is leading them to want to take the action, and it takes very little time. You know, 10 to 15 seconds extra on a turn, if that. But all you have to do is kind of, but if you do it consistently on every turn, you know, my character hikes their pants up and says, yeah, sure, I can do that. I've got it, right? And with like bravado and confidence. That tells me a lot about your character, and you barely said anything.
Right.
Having everybody do this on every single round would be a little tedious, but I thought that was very cool. The third thing I wanted to say about Always on Initiative is that it is gone. It is gone. I have no idea what the third idea was, and we're going to move on. I'm going to keep all this in. Oh, man. I really enjoyed talking about the role playing, and I you know,
as one does. And
as so often happens, I have forgotten where I was going.
We'll see if we can get you back. Is the Always on Initiative and the role play bit, I think it's worth saying also, if we're in town and they're talking to a shopkeeper or a quest purveyor, again, long form campaign that I'm talking about, not
yes.
a hyper like bespoke session. You know, I say that with a lot of like admiration for the sessions you're running now online. If they are like a very bespoke experience you're offering, you're like, this exact thing is what we're doing.
Dungeon focus, baby.
Yeah. So when we're chatting it up with the local shopkeeper / questionably maybe Thieves Guild Lord, that, yeah, we're just in character talking about how you're sitting around and what that's going. And sometimes I do stay with a player for 20 minutes or 2 or 3 players, and that sucks. But if it's in a long form campaign, there's also stakes in knowing what's going on over there. And also you can get up and get a snack and come back. We did this in Dolmenwood plenty of times.
Totally.
There were a couple characters and they're having interaction, and it's like, cool, like do that. I'm interested to see where that goes, or I'm going to go pee. That's a part of it that I think is worth maintaining. And if you watch Kelsey do her actual plays that exist online, that's how it goes. It's not a long form campaign, but you can see the free form initiative come in very naturally. And then, hey, but let's make sure, as guidelines, that we might keep moving around and around to each person. Another tool in your quick descriptor. As a GM, you can give this to your players. Part of I'm going to stick with this, and I kind of hope she doesn't listen, but my correcting my wife, I try not to think of it as correcting, but hey, dude, you have 1 turn. You can't do all 10 of those. Pick which one you want to do. Will be and she told me in the last session you ran for her.
Yeah.
You had to do the what is it you're trying to achieve? Because she'll start doing this stuff in character. And if she's in character, it's very in character, and she'll start spinning off doing a thing, and you're like, excuse me, I have to adjudicate this. What are you trying to get done exactly? Yeah. And I think that's an okay thing to say to a player if they're like, oh, and I'm gonna, you can be like, hey, what's your goal here? And for my what's your intentions? Okay, let's resolve all that. That's a big part of it, is making sure I'm clear on what's your objective. So in my mind, they're very small, snappy. That's the weakest snap in the universe. But
it suddenly goes miles away. It was right next to the mic.
Did a third thing occur to you?
Yeah, a third thing occurred to me, Jody.
Tell me.
So, okay, but I want to stay on that for just a second. I really think that's a great piece of advice, and it's certainly not something that we came up with, but I think there's a great Seth Skorkowski video about ask your players, what do you want, or basically this idea of, what is your intention and what is your goal? Great question. When you are done adjudicating all those, when you're done figuring out what your players want to get done and figuring out if they got it done, the thing that I see a lot of times not procedurally done, that I think is to the detriment of any Shadowdark game, is to have a GM turn, where I see a lot of I see this on the Glass Cannon, where I am just begging for them to use rounds, figure out if a round has passed, say, okay, a round goes by, for a few reasons. Number one, you got to get in the habit of doing that. Otherwise, if you fall out of the habit, you're going to lose track of when somebody casts, a spell that lasts a number of rounds. You're gonna lose track of how many rounds have gone by. And I am not doing this as much as I should on the Kindly Craw games. Maybe. I think, I don't know, not enough time has passed, and I haven't really thought about this, but it's also very clearly kind of baked into our initiative tracker, which displays all the names, and GM turn is one of them. So in person, though, it can be really easy to just kind of barrel through rounds. And I have found, watching the Glass Cannon and listening to people talk about the initiative system, that it's very clear to me that they're not rigidly tracking individual rounds of play. And that means that they're losing track of when to roll for random encounters, and things aren't ticking down. There aren't opportunities for the GM to have a moment to kind of do some housekeeping, right? Which is what those GM turns really are supposed to be. I don't know. I feel very strongly about this, actually. I even when it's low stakes, I still think, maybe not when you're talking to the shopkeeper. Anytime there's any level of necessity for procedure, this is what I like. Dungeon turns in BX D&D. When I was running OSE, it's one of the things that I loved about OSE were dungeon turns. They're supposed to be 10 minutes, but no one that I've seen, whether it be the 3d6 down the line, like dungeon turns are a stand-in for an approximation of time, and they're just a unit, a measurement of how much time it took to adjudicate a task, and they're abstracted in a lot of ways, even though they're supposed to be 10 minutes. You can do the same thing with Shadowdark. You just take 10 6-minute turns or whatever, like to instead of using a torch timer. And so that's the part that I think gets people, is that, first of all, the fact that the torch timer and rounds don't really interact in meaningful ways. But I see a lot of people who, when I read their questions or I see them play in an actual play, it's like, you guys, you need to use rounds. Otherwise, people start doing more than one action in a turn. It starts to break down who has gone, who hasn't. Was that just input from your character, or were you taking a turn? That structure gets lost without a GM turn.
I think that's a great observation to the greater kind of point, if you will, of just what kind of time segments are we talking about here? Really that's the core of it, because I was thinking,
well, a round doesn't have a time attached to it in Shadowdark.
Right. And as you were starting to kind of talk through that, my initial thoughts were like, oh, there's this other system calls it this. This other system I know of calls it this and this. And I was like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's the idea of whatever amount of time we are talking about, what we call it doesn't matter. Is hopefully it's clear to players, but what are you getting done during this span of time?
Downtime is, you could do all of your downtime in a single round.
And to a degree, should.
Yep.
Like, whether you're going to do it maximally procedurally and it is a clonk of a D8 and that's the end of it, or you want to talk through those, but no, work around the table. I think that's, and being transparent with your characters. I'm realizing in my own process, like, that's a thing I could probably be a little more rigid about or clear about. Is, okay, combat rounds are very clear. It's a few thrusts and parries of a sword and a back and forth of axe and shield, and that's what we've either did or didn't cause damage for that back and forth, and maybe a run across the room. But if we're in a crawling round or an exploration round or whatever flavor of name you want to call it, that amount of time is kind of loosey-goosey. And, especially as increasingly if we're in those, like, mentally I am shifting as a GM between combat. Okay, now we're still always on initiative going around the table, but now we're like in an exploration phase, and I'm not using the declare your stuff in combat. Like, no, sure. It's your turn in combat. The time units are too small here to, like, well, I was thinking about. What I have noticed from the declaration phase is I am slowly seeing players do a little bit more of, hey, well, if you're doing that, then can I? Which is, I think, well, isn't that the core of, like, that's the whole deal for you with initiative, is how do we get through turns quickly and allow players to interact in character maximally? And there's a weird, like, those two things are opposed to each other almost, of, I want to maximally quick get around the table. Well, that means every person does their totally individual thing and I resolve that next. But the goal is to have them chat through. That's what you're looking for, right? Is the both. I want it all.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I want an initiative system that encourages teamwork. So let me give you an example of this. I tried this in 5th edition, right? Where there's this very sort of popular initiative system where essentially you roll initiative versus a DC, which could be what the monster rolled, or a stagnant DC, or a standard DC, whatever it is. If you roll, if you meet or beat it, then you go before the monster, and everybody goes as a group, as a side, essentially side-based initiative. Then the monster goes, then everybody else goes. So basically, you just get kind of a free round if you beat the DC, and then we just go back and forth. And players take their turns in any order they want. In fact, Daggerheart has adopted this kind of freeform initiative system as well. And that allows for sort of combos. Like, I love that stuff. Like, I love, but the truth of the matter is, I have never seen that actually borne out. Like, I have, to me, the tactical infinity of OSR games, and granted, I have tried this less with OSR games than I have with like 5th edition. And I think in 5th edition, the system is bespoke for player turns, like individual player turns in a way, like none of the abilities are really built to be comboed together. So it breaks down pretty easily. But even in OSR games, this idea of like tactical infinity ends up overloading the decision space. Like you have too many options. And when you add in another player, or you know, a bunch of different players, you actually end up in a place where you can't talk through all of the options. And so you either need highly decisive players who are all kind of on the same page about tactics and kind of play similarly, or you need individual turns to silo people off so that the tactical infinity is theirs and theirs alone on their turn. Because to me, what we're talking about is like how much of a cognitive load can players handle? And I don't mean that in like a negative way. I just mean that in like
there's a limit.
This game is supposed to be fun, and when you start treating it as if there's like you're looking exclusively for optimal play, that takes a lot of players out of the equation. And when you add in, not only should you play somewhat optimally and think about tactical infinity and think about like, you know, how to use the game world to your benefit, which is the beauty for a lot of us about OSR games. But then you add to it that like now you have to think about what everyone else can do. And you have to kind of know a little bit about what everyone's characters are good at, or maybe if you care about role playing, like what their characters' kind of proclivities are and their character traits. Man, that means that you're thinking about your character and everybody else's character in a time where you're supposed to be making decisions very quickly. That's like a non-trivial amount of stuff to think about. And it's not fun for a lot of players who just want to swing their sword and do some damage. And what I have realized in my time GMing is there are more players who just want to swing their sword and do damage than I think a lot of us GMs really want to admit to ourselves, because we want to believe that our players are hyper engaged and like and are really involved and really what they're engaged in is what's happening at the table. Like they want to hit the goblin and do damage and see what happens when the goblin dies and see what happens next and see what happens next. I don't know, man. Yeah.
Oh, just on the other end, there's the player who also is taking the world so seriously that they're worried about everything.
Yeah.
And then it gets to their turn and they go, well, I don't know what to do.
Right.
And because I'm afraid of everything, because they're so immersed actually, or they're just differential as a person and they go, well, you all tell me what to do, which is actually my least favorite of all these things. But yeah, I think that's a great point of like, you know, what's the right thing. And like everything with GMing and role-playing games is it's going to be super idiosyncratic to the player and what their wants and whims and such are.
Yeah. So, Jody, I think we've solved the problem.
I think we've identified it. Maybe have we identified the problem?
I certainly think we've covered a lot of ground, and I think that was a great discussion. So let's hear from an advertiser, a sponsor.
I think they prefer that.
Yeah, I think they would. Advertiser sounds bad. They're not advertising. Actually, today we're going to do something a little bit different in our advertising slot, Jody. I think you'll like this. So I got something for you. I think you're going to be excited. Okay. All right. Before we continue, we're going to talk about our most powerful patron, you, via the Dungeon Master Diaries Adventurers Guild. Have you ever listened to Dungeon Master Diaries and thought, by gods, I would gladly throw a few coins into a hat to ensure this nonsense continues? Well, good news, friend, you can't. For the low cost of a handful of gold each month, you cannot become an official backer of questionable decisions. By not pledging to our not at all suspicious patronage system, you won't unlock exclusive boons such as bonus episodes, behind the screen lore, and early access to content that we're not going to make. You will not hear your name read aloud during our rituals of gratitude pronounced almost correctly. And you will not continue to keep our warm, comforting torches lit for another month. There are not higher tiers that grant even greater rewards. There are no secret channels. There are no exclusive tables and no possibility of a personal curse lifted once a year, depending on your scheduling. So if you enjoyed Dungeon Master Diaries, do us a favor. Keep listening and do not ever give us any money to keep this nonsense going. All right, Jody, let's bring this topic into the light with some core takeaways. It sounds to me like you've got something you want to, an addendum, actually, that you want to add, perhaps.
'Tis both a takeaway and an addendum.
Okay. Well, I'll wait.
All right. So
I'll wait for my turn.
Oh, golly! I wish we'd done that on purpose. One of us, me. So I started this talking about the weird thing I did with the Dragonbane initiative of giving the monster 2 goes. And that's one of my takeaways is there's a very common suggestion on the interwebs of like, hey, during combat, if you have 2 different kinds of monsters, have them go at 2 different times or something. Literally in my last game where I tried this, and I don't know if it was just a byproduct of the player being rad and creative or that we were using this staggered initiative where the monster had multiple attacks. And I said, I'm just going to separate those attacks to different spots in the initiative order, which is a thing you could easily do, right? That's the easy answer is this Shadowdark monster has 3 attacks. Well, then it has 3 initiative beats and it does 1 attack on each of those beats. Cool. Do that. But what the player did is they said, hey, on my go, can I sync up with another player who's later in the initiative round so that my fighter who doesn't have a magic weapon can get a effectively holy weapon or cleansing flame or whatever it was on their weapon, and then they can attack and get the attack in. And I was like, you guys are going to combo that action up. Yeah, I was like, absolutely. That's awesome. But that means that's your new initiative spot. That's where you go in initiative. And it was just interesting. It was, again, that like interactive play during combat that we want to see. And it was rad and it was cool. And it was neat to see the players sync up the like priest casting holy weapon as the fighter goes, charging in, so to speak. And then it actually had a little bit of consequence. It was very minor, but it did go, well, now the monster's attack is now here compared to where it was. So there was something to it. Again, I don't know, but I am really curious to see as I play more what staggering out attacks in this way does for the game.
That's super interesting. I mean, that reminds me of, I think it's a Pathfinder thing where you can delay and then you take your turn. You kind of like are in a new initiative spot. But of course, that uses individual initiative based on your initiative total that you rolled. So I think that also goes hand in hand with my first takeaway, which is that I think GMs need to answer this question is whether or not they're going to allow held actions. Like, do you allow... if 2 players want to hold their actions and say, like, if the goblin runs through the doorway, I'm going to smack him with my sword. Do you allow that? And I go back and forth on this. I think that Shadowdark benefits from not allowing it in terms of action economy and in terms of just like the way that you adjudicate combat. But I think the fun of the game benefits from allowing held actions, and the teamwork often allows from held actions.
For held actions, I am so aggressively camp yes, because of the 5e structure of if then. If this happens, then I will blank. And I just think that keeps it, because it keeps it fast. I pass that, not so much. You know what? Try stuff. You don't know what to do about held actions? Here's my last takeaway. Try stuff. Side-based initiative, always on initiative, never on initiative. I don't even know what that means. I think the most important thing about Shadowdark's initiative system is just get players' turns. Keep it moving and give everybody a turn. Keep that spotlight moving. And that's, at the end of the day, what we're all here for. So, just if that's your North Star, that everybody gets a turn and we keep those turns moving pretty equitably, whatever you're doing is going to be fine.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're choosing an initiative system, I think in terms of what you just said, Jody, that when you're trying stuff, try stuff and try and figure out where your players are at. Your initiative system should complement your players to the best of your ability. If you have a bunch of players who are really decisive and really want to do that teamwork, tactical infinity thing, then I think that Shadowdark's initiative system probably isn't going to be the thing that you're looking for. But there are an almost infinite number of ways to go around the table, Jody, and we have just scratched the surface.
Well, as the torchlight grows dim, we hope you're able to find something useful in this episode that you can take into a future game. If you have any questions or unique experiences from your table that you'd like us to discuss in a future episode, you can email us at dmdiariespod@gmail.com. You can reach out to us on the internet in places. The best one is on the Shadowdark Discord channel under the Dungeon Master Diaries thread. You can find links to those feeds and any other materials we reference in this episode's show notes. Until next time, take your time and take your turn. Holy cow, go.
Dungeon Master Diaries is an independent production. It is not... I think I already did this guy.
No.
Oh.
I made my butt.
I was kind of doing a Count Chocula. Anyways, ha ha ha! Dungeon Master Diaries is an independent production. Is not affiliated with the Arcane Library LLC. Shadowdark RPG is a product of the Arcane Library. Copyright 2023. Our intro and outro music is composed by Christian Schuster. Okay. All right. It's not my best work. Do you think I should re-record it? You know what? Leave it in.